You're listening to Fire Ecology Chats, a podcast series by the Association for Fire Ecology.
Hello, everyone. Bob Keane here again with you with another edition of Fire Ecology Chats. Fire Ecology Chats is where we discuss a certain paper that was just recently published in Fire Ecology. And today we're going to talk about a paper that is really important in the European stage. We've got two of the authors here to talk about it, Carolina and Jonathan. And the name of the paper is Projected Fire Weather Intensification Across the Mediterranean, Implications for Management and Restoration. Carolina, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Yes, thank you. I'm Carolina Gallo, and I work on integrated fire management and forest landscape restoration in the Forestry Division of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. And I've just completed my PhD at the Center for Agroecology, Water and Resilience at Coventry University. And this paper represents the third chapter of my thesis.
Well, welcome aboard, Carolina. And Jonathan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Bob. I'm Jonathan Eden. I'm an associate professor at the Centre for Agroecology, Water and Resilience that Carolina mentioned at Coventry University in the UK. I supervised Carolina's PhD, which was an absolute pleasure, with some fantastic papers and results that came out of it. I work chiefly on climate variability and extremes, and particularly how they influence fire risk.
Well, fantastic is a great way to describe this paper. So let's find out about this fantastic paper. Carolina, would you like to tell us a little about it?
Yeah, well, the paper tackles a crucial question, how climate change is reshaping fire weather across the Mediterranean biome and what that means for land management and restoration. So we've been able to show how the region's ecosystems are increasingly exposed to more extreme conditions and longer seasons, and why planning for restoration in the present has to be fire smart, climate smart, and long-term in its ambition. What makes this study particularly useful is that we provide robust projections across the entire Mediterranean biome, so not just South Europe, but also North Africa and the Near East, and explicitly linking the results to different land covers.
Yeah, it's a wonderful paper. Jonathan, would you like to add more?
That's a great summary, Carolina. I think the key takeaway that we have from this paper is that future fire risk, it won't just increase, it will fundamentally shift. And our results show that quite clearly. So it's really important for management and restoration strategies to adapt now. That's our key takeaway.
Why did you do the paper?
So we did this study because even if the Mediterranean region is one of the world's biodiversity hotspots, it is at the same time a fire-prone region. So although fire is an integral part of the ecosystems in the Mediterranean, the number of fires and the area burned continue to increase. So for instance, just last fire season in 2025 was the worst ever recorded for some Southern European countries. And this has also growing impacts on landscapes and communities. And then also in my work at FAO, after more than 10 years working with Mediterranean countries through the FAO's Committee on Mediterranean Forestry Questions, that is Silva Mediterránea, I also wanted to produce something that could be useful for countries facing these challenges every year.
You certainly did that. It's an important paper and people should read it. I really like the methods, Jonathan. Would you like to describe them a little?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the key strengths of this study is how we've handled the climate data that we use to generate these projections for the future. We're using the climate data to calculate the fire weather index, which is used routinely, not just in Canada where it was originally designed for use, but in all sorts of other countries, all parts of the world. We use climate models, the latest generation of climate change projections, and they're really powerful tools, but they do have biases, particularly at regional scales. And we use a statistical method to correct those biases and to downscale the data. So that makes it much more reliable at the kind of regional scales at which regional fire risk analysis is done. So from a methodological point of view, the key thing is that we're combining a high-performing climate model that we've previously determined in previous work to be high-performing. We've combined that with a multivariate bias correction. So we're trying to preserve the relationships that exist between the different components that are relevant for fire-conducive conditions. So that's temperature, humidity, wind speed, and precipitation. So these variables are all interacting, and we're not just dealing with them one at a time. So the idea is to produce climate projections that are not just spatially refined, but also physically consistent for fire applications. Another thing is that future climate projections are often made with respect to a range of different climate scenarios, the so-called shared socioeconomic pathways. Presently, there's quite some debate about which of these scenarios is the most plausible as we go forward. There's been some talk in the news in recent months about that. But this can really complicate the message when we're attempting to deliver a new set of projections for the future. So what we've done here is to present our projections with respect to different levels of global warming. So we've got 1.5 degrees above the pre-industrial average, 2 degrees, 3 degrees, and so on. And this is made regardless of what point in the future we might reach such levels. So it's designed to be more easily communicable.
Well, people should really read the paper and find out their interesting results. But Jonathan, can you give us a little peek at what the results are in this paper?
The main result is that fire weather is projected to intensify across the Mediterranean in several ways. First of all, we find that fire seasons get longer, potentially by weeks, potentially a month. We also find that they're projected to start earlier in the year than they did previously. The second thing is that extreme fire weather conditions are becoming more common, especially in forest and in mixed landscapes. Thirdly, the strongest increases we've found tend to occur in northern parts of the Mediterranean. As we mentioned before, this study is important. So many studies on the Mediterranean really only cover the European part. What we're doing here is making sure we include the whole biome, including North Africa and the Near East. But what we have found is that the strongest increases tend to occur in the northern Mediterranean. So that's parts of Spain, of France, and of Italy. So overall, the general picture is that we're looking at more frequent, more intense, and longer lasting fire weather conditions.
Grim forecasts, I hate to say, but what do you think would be the management implications of your predictions and forecasting?
I think the results are very useful in terms of how practical they can be in two different ways. So one, they can help managers get better prepared for fire seasons. So for future fire seasons, as Jonathan just mentioned, the fire seasons will be starting earlier, last longer, and become more extreme. So that gives us also an idea of how we can prepare for those in terms of prevention and preparedness. And then they can also help scientists and practitioners to design better restoration strategies that are adapted to the future fire regimes, especially now that we are in the middle of this global movement of the UN decade on ecosystem restoration. We have to make sure that all the efforts on restoring ecosystems or restoring burned areas will be able to then be resilient to these future fire regimes. So in summary, I think they can support both better preparedness and better long-term planning.
Yeah, I love in the paper how you keep on emphasizing the fact that you cannot do restoration without recognizing this really hot and dry future. So thank you for that. That's a great paper. Thank you, both of you, for taking the time. Carolina, would you like to recognize co-authors or funding agencies?
Yeah, actually, I would love to recognize all the co-authors, but of course, I'm not going to go one by one, but especially those ones that have been with me along all the path of the PhD process that also are co-authors of other papers. But in terms of funding, I would like to mention that my PhD was done within the framework of a studentship from the Center of Agroecology, Water and Resilience at Coventry University. And I would like to recognize also FAO, where I am currently working, because thanks to FAO, we could publish this specific paper.
Very well. Good. Thank you again for publishing in Fire Ecology, and thank you for taking your time today. I really appreciate it. For those of you listening, if you thought this paper was interesting, and I surely did, then you have got to download it off our Fire Ecology website. And guess what? It won't cost you a cent. It's totally free because these wonderful people have already paid the freight for you to go ahead and use it. So read this paper, check it out. It's a really important paper, and I want to thank both of you for dedicating your time to Fire Ecology Chats. And please tune in for the next Fire Ecology Chat.
Thank you for listening to Fire Ecology Chats, a podcast series by the Association for Fire Ecology. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to our show and leave us a review. To learn more about fire ecology and support our future work by becoming a member, visit fireecology.org. FIREECOLOGY.org.